you know?
Could you hold on for 1 second? Because my wife's running the vacuum over here.
Yeah.
Do you, just, all right. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the show. Today we got a special guest, my old friend, Michael Mulvey. We used to run around First Avenue together when we were teenagers, and as fate would have it, later on in life, while I was chasing bad guys around the Bronx, Michael was prosecuting them in the ADA's office, the District Attorney's office of the Bronx. Guy's got a ton of stories. I mean, unfortunately, I could probably do 10 shows with this guy, but today you got him just for today. Enough of that. Here's my introduction. Let's listen to some stories. Hey there, Mike. How you doing, my friend?
Great, Travis. How about yourself?
Good, good. So good. I'm so happy you're able to join us today. Now, I already mentioned to our listeners, you and I know each other for quite a while. I mean, we were, running around the streets down on First Avenue in Yorkville, just a couple of miscreants, drinking beers and smoking pot in abandoned buildings until we, got swept up in the whole 84th Street bomber world, which is a whole story in itself that we're not going to talk about today. But we do have a history.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And it's great to kind of look back and reminisce about old times and where we were at, and then take a look at where we're at today and how much our lives have changed.
Oh, and I'm happy to say, well, for you and I and several of us, have changed absolutely for the better. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for everybody.
That's true.
Yeah. But overall, I'm pretty happy where I am, and I'm pretty sure you are too.
I am.
Yeah. All right. So today, again, let's talk about, just a little bit when we were kids. Now, again, we both grew up in Yorkville, the Yorkville section of Manhattan, which is, a working class neighborhood that was on the east side. And you are the child of immigrants, right?
That's correct. Both my mom and dad were born in Ireland. They emigrated here to the U.S., both blue-collar workers. They had very limited education, not beyond grammar school. They met here in New York, and they got married. And my brother and I were born here, and we grew up in a rent-controlled apartment on the Upper East Side, 4-story walk-up.
And you both were born here. You weren't born in Ireland, correct?
That's correct. Both me and my brother were born here.
That's right. Cool. Yeah. I just remember I have so many memories, especially since we, met up, whatever it was, a year ago, and how we were all doing that very humble hand to mouth kind of thing, trying to get through life. How, well, again, that was until, I don't know. I think you disappeared from our life when we were around 17 or so, 17, 18. Me and Henry left for the military, as did several of our friends. And you disappeared altogether. We didn't know what happened. There was a while, I'm not going to say a rumor, but there was some idiots were saying you had actually gone back to Ireland and you joined the IRA or some nonsense like that, which I'm sure is not the case,
Well, there's a little bit of truth to the rumor, Travis, I have to confess.
Oh, really? Let's hear about that.
So my folks, I guess they weren't so happy with how things were going here in New York, and they thought the old country was a much better place to raise kids. So we moved back to Ireland, actually, for about a year and a half, and both me and my brother attended school there. I actually joined the FCA, they call it, which is the Irish Reserve Army. It was just training and stuff like that for a short period of time. But I guess when we got back there, Mom and Dad realized that Ireland had changed a lot, and it had modernized, and it wasn't the old country that they grew up in. And it was not what they expected, and then we in turn came back to New York.
Okay, so you would have
after a year and a half.
I'm right then. Like when we were leaving at 17, 18, right at the cusp there, that's about the same time you disappeared, yes?
That's, I think, a little bit later. I remember when you and Henry went into the Army.
Okay.
And I was proud of you guys parachuting into Grenada.
Yeah.
And
well, I didn't.
So that was right about the time when we went to Ireland, spent about a year and a half, and then came back. So growing up was pretty interesting. Mom and Dad sacrificed and sent us to Catholic school, so they had to pay the tuition, keep us out of the public school system. And believe it or not, both my parents are very religious. Not to believe it that or not, but they had a strong influence on me. And I went to a high school at Cathedral Preparatory Seminary, which is to
Yes.
prepare folks to become priests. And went in there with a pretty serious attitude about it. Thought about it for a while, for a couple of years, as I moved through the system, the school system. But at the end of the day, I guess it was my attraction to women that made me decide not to go into the priesthood, and I didn't pursue that. So I went to City College, graduated from Lehman College. I went to a couple of different city universities before that.
Lehman in the Bronx, correct?
In the Bronx. And originally, I guess I was doing a pre-med program, thinking I'd be a doctor. But I got an epitome when I was in college and decided to do the pre-law program. All through my life, I thought about growing up to be a detective, just like you, Travis. And I had taken the police test, and I was admitted to the police cadet corps. Well, I was still in the process of being admitted to the police cadet corps when I went into the pre-law program at Lehman, and that allowed me to skip my last year of college and go right into law school. So looking at the police department, law school, the police cadet corps had a 2-year commitment. I was thinking after graduating from college, I thought that would interfere with me going to law school. So I kind of leaned away from that. Then I took the corrections exam and the court officers exam also. Again, wanted to go into law enforcement. Ever since I was a kid, I used to watch all the cop shows and the prosecution shows on TV.
So you had an attraction to it, yeah.
And when I went to law school, I was fully committed. I was going to be a prosecutor, and that was it. I wasn't going to be a corporate lawyer or a divorce lawyer or wills and estates or anything like that. So anyway, the correction officers called me, and I was still in school. I went out to take the test. I got there to take the medical exam. I got there about 15. I scored 100 on the correction officer exam, so I got called pretty quickly. So I was happy about that. But when I showed up to get the medical, I was 15 minutes late. The door was locked, and there was a big sign saying, you're out. Do not return.
Yeah.
Don't come back. So then I realized, this is pretty strict. So I got into law school and continued through there. And first year of law school, the court officers called. So I thought it didn't make sense at this point because I'm already in law school and it's going to interfere with that. So I politely declined the invitation. I had been on that list as well. So when I graduated law school, I went about what I intended to do, to be a prosecutor. I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Bronx DA's office. And I tell you, it was a fantastic job. Opened my eyes to another section of the city where I had, maybe in my youth and when I was an adolescent, touched upon here and there, but this really threw me into the mix, and I really seen how the other side, so to speak, lived on the unfortunate underbelly of the city in the South Bronx.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the Bronx is a very serious place. It's a sad place. It's a funny thing. I absolutely love the Bronx. I love the people of the Bronx. I very much enjoyed working there. A lot of things I miss about the Bronx, but it is an absolutely heartbreaking place that so many people don't realize. And we can we could talk about the Bronx just by itself for an hour, but it is a sad place. I'm sorry to say. So now you got yourself. Well, here's an interesting thing, something that I've mentioned before to other people. You took a very working class route in that too, where almost everybody from our neighborhood, all right, unless they had a criminal record, it was almost rote that you took every test possible: police exam, fire exam, corrections exam. I don't know what else you said. I said some other exams that you took. Court officers exam. I took all of these exams too. It's like, what are we going to do? We got to get ourselves a civil service job, man. Because if not, you're going to be doing the 580 thing, building buildings, doing the iron worker thing, or you're going to be a 32B, opening door. Can I get you a taxi, sir? Kind of nonsense. That was pretty much the route for most of our friends.
Absolutely. My dad was in 32B. He was a doorman on the Upper West Side, 239 Central Park West. And I worked with him there when I was in college. Mm-hmm. And after I was in college, I worked there part-time. And then my father-in-law was also on 32B. He was a security guard at a commercial building downtown at 85 Broad Street. And when there wasn't a permanent full-time job at my dad's shop, my father-in-law got me into his place in the commercial building as a security guard. Goldman Sachs leased the whole building at the time. And I worked there 40 hours a week while I went to Lehman College at night, full-time, carrying 12 to 15 credits to get my way through college. So you're 100% right. That was the door of opportunity that was open for us, was these unions that paid a fair wage, that had decent medical benefits, and that's where I was focused. But the municipal unions even better. And my brother joined housing and worked for the city as well.
Yeah,
I said all of our friends.
He was a maintenance man for housing?
He was a maintenance man for housing, so he did plumbing, electric, locksmith type work, and renovating apartments for all of those different trades.
Yeah. So in the end, as miserable as it may have been, or as unbelievably boring as it may have been, in the end, you got himself a nice pension out of it.
Yep. And medical benefits.
Yeah, which is it. Man, and today you cannot buy those things. You can't. So good for him. So we'll kind of fast forward a little bit, all right, we haven't seen you for years. Again, you kind of fell out of our life. And then I get a phone call from our mutual friend, Henry, all right, who we both love so dearly. And he says, Travis, you're never going to know who I saw today. And I'm like, who'd you say? He says, Mike Mulvey. I'm like, get out of here. I haven't seen him in years. Where'd you see him? And what did he tell me? He says he's an ADA. He's working in the Bronx courts. Of course, where I was, 3 or 4 times a week, especially when I was in narcotics, I was up there all the time, And he said, yeah, I met him. We bullshitted for a little while. We talked about old times. He says, and then I was walking down the hallway. He yelled to me, hey, Henry. He says, don't tell anybody about me, and I won't tell anybody about you, And I always got a kick out of that story. So
yeah, no, it was great. I was in the place doing the grind. About 18 months into my jobs, I was in the criminal court bureau for the first year. We handled misdemeanor, lower level cases, kind of cutting our teeth, learning the ropes. And then we get promoted to the grand jury bureau for the next year, where we present felonies to the grand jury. Mm-hmm. So I was in my office, and at the time, in the criminal court bureau, we worked out of a place called the Barn. So it was like this huge room, and there were all these desks facing the wall all around the perimeter, and 3 lawyers would share each one desk. Mm-hmm. On each desk, there was a rotary dial phone. And so I graduated from that to the grand jury bureau, where you'd get a regular office, but there'd be 3 or 4 desks. So the Barn had about 20 desks, or 18 to 20 desks. So in the grand jury bureau, you got an office, but there'd be about 3 desks in each room, and maybe 2 people would share a desk. So I'm sitting there with a witness that I'm preparing to testify in the grand jury, and we continue to talk back and forth. And then the person says to me, ADA Mulvey, and at the same time, unbeknownst to me, Henry's passing the hallway, walking outside of my office. And all of a sudden, I see somebody at the door stop dead in their tracks, and they turn around, they have this shocked look on their face.
Yeah.
And it's Henry. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, I know this guy. And he says to me, Mulvey? I'm like, yeah. He goes, Michael Mulvey? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, he was just, he had this surprised look on his face. And I don't want to curse on the podcast.
Oh, you can. Go ahead.
He goes, holy shit. And he comes over, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, Henry? He goes, yeah, Henry Ramirez. And we shook hands, and we were just started to reminisce, like, on the spot.
Yeah.
We didn't have much time. I had to go in the grand jury, but it was eye-opening. And then later on, he told me that he had reached out to you and told you what happened, and you were surprised too. But it was kind of fortuitous, right? We all grew up on the Upper East Side, and then we all end up in the Bronx in law enforcement. It was,
yes,
what a coincidence.
It was very strange.
All the people in Manhattan, right? Millions of people.
Exactly.
And the 3 of us end up in the same place.
I just describe this for our listeners now, because I would kind of like to paint a picture, all right? And people can't realize back again how crazy the Bronx was, especially back in the 90s. So, like, I remember coming down, going to central booking, and I would meet with my first ADA, who would be, all these people would be in their writing cases in central booking. Now, that wasn't the Barn that you're talking about, but it was very much a very
So
hectic barn. It should be, I don't know what you called it, but it should have been a barn or a corral because the place
complaint
was
room.
bananas.
We call it the complaint room.
The complaint room.
So yeah, so that would be in the criminal court building on the right side after you go down the steps,
Yeah.
and there's a bunch of cubicles set up there, and that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's misdemeanor assistant DAs with years of experience in handling the smaller cases, and then felony assistant DAs who write the bigger cases, and they have many, many more years of experience, and then one supervisor. So when the police bring in the arrest, the online booking sheet is handed in there, and we create the DA's folder with some of the details off the online booking sheet, and we interview the police officer. We take down in our folder a narrative of the facts of the crime and any witnesses. As you know, sometimes there's a civilian witness and sometimes there's not.
Yep.
We start collecting some of the evidence. So on a criminal trial, if the defendant confessed, then the confession is evidence. If there was some type of an identification procedure and the victim picked the defendant out of a lineup or a photo array, that's evidence as well. So in our folder, we make notations of this because we're obligated to notify the defendant's attorney at the arraignment or within a short period of time thereafter if we have a statement made by the defendant or if we have a photo array or a lineup procedure that's taken place that we intend to introduce at the trial. So all of these, the case starts coming together in that very room that you're talking about hours after the arrest, once the arresting officer brings the defendant and lodges them in central booking.
Yeah. And it was such a nutty place. Now, again, it's hard to well, we can describe it, but it's hard for people to picture. But we would bring the prisoners in on the side of the building, and it was central booking is a horrific place. It's just so filthy and smells of body odor and urine. It's just a disgusting, dirty, dirty, dirty place with several large cells that they would pack. I mean, pack full of people. Sometimes it was standing room only. People couldn't even sit down, the prisoners. It was so nuts. Then there was this long, narrow corridor, hallway, that you would walk down, and that's where all the ADA sat. I mean, literally, you are, 40 feet away from where all the prisoners are housed, for the next day or two. And then you had those benches that we would sit out there, kind of like church pews, the big, long benches. We put our case in, and sometimes on a busy night, it would take so long for us, police and detectives, to be seen by you guys. We would grab one of those manila folders or an envelope or something. I'd write my name, Myers, okay, on whatever that is. What do they call that shit? Oak tag or whatever it was. Get some Scotch tape or a string and hang it around my neck or tape it to my chest and nod out and go to sleep, and wait, because I've already been up for 8 or 10, 12 hours as it is, and wait for somebody to come kick me on the foot. Myers, is this you? And call me in, because the workload for us was astronomical in the 90s, and for you, the same.
So we'd have a bunch of little bins set up at the front of that room, the complaint room.
Yeah.
And in there, we would put the folder with the online booking sheet, and they would be arranged in order of the time that the arresting officer brought the arrest in. And we'd have one bin for misdemeanors and one for felonies. And you'd go up to the next one online, you'd pick it up, you'd go into the room where you guys were sitting on the church pews and sleeping, and there would be a TV playing, but no one was ever watching the TV. And we'd yell out the name of the arresting officer, and they get up, and then they come back with us into the complaint room and sit at the desk, and we'd start filling out our folder and interviewing the arresting officer. If there was a civilian complainant, we always put the civilians at the front because we didn't want to inconvenience them.
Yes.
Obviously, they're crime victims, so another reason we don't want to keep them in the courthouse. And sometimes very sensitive crimes have taken place, not just robbery, but obviously there's rapes and other things. And we don't want to have them sit around in these unsavory circumstances in this dirty area for an extended period of time and stress them needlessly. And we want to encourage them to come back and testify in the future at any trial or grand jury proceeding. So we put them at the front of the queue. But clearly, it would be not unusual to wait for you to wait 4 hours or even 8 hours, and on a Saturday night, 10 or 12
Not at all.
hours for a case to get written up.
Yes.
And then there was a older sergeant who was in charge of moving the police officers through this whole process, because the overtime clock was ticking,
Yes.
and the city was incurring costs. So there's one particular sergeant, very older gentleman, and he not only did he scream at all the police officers, but he was screaming at all the ADAs because they weren't processing the case fast enough.
Yeah. Well, there
And
were
I recall
several.
when I became a supervisor some years later, and I was in charge of the complaint room, supervising the assistants in there, he come up to me and he started reporting some of the ADAs for not processing the police paperwork and the ADA's the paperwork for the court quick enough so that the officers could get back and stop incurring overtime. And he even started questioning some of the ADAs. He started to keep track of when they went out on a lunch break.
Yes.
So if they went out too long, then he'd report them to the supervisor also.
Yeah.
So really interesting place, a lot of noise, a lot of craziness going on. But as you say, even on the weekends, it would pick up. On a Saturday night, it would pick up.
Oh, no.
Especially during the summertime. In the summertime, the Bronx was pretty crazy. It was pretty violent. Everybody was out in the streets 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody that was out at that hour was under some type of controlled substance. They were agitated. They were shooting each other, stabbing each other, fist fights, car accidents, you name it.
I lived it. I know.
Busy.
Yeah, I know. I remember it. I always make the joke, when people say, "Oh, what was it like being a detective in the Bronx?" I say, business was good. Business was good. It was hopping, man. Bronx was hopping.
I tell old law school buddies or even lawyers that ask me about my experience there, and I say it's the best place for a lawyer to go to learn how to try a case, because right out of law school, they're giving you, at any given time, I had 120 to 180 open files in criminal court that were misdemeanors. Now, most of them pled out, 99%. But once in a while, something to go to trial. Mm-hmm. And either it was so egregious that we were insisting on a stiff penalty. One example is an ex-con had thrown something. I'm trying to remember what it was he threw at his girlfriend because he was upset with her, and it hit her 9-year-old daughter on the leg and broke her leg.
Oh, geez.
So the issue there was, he didn't intend to break the 9-year-old girl's leg, but he did intend to hurt the other woman. So it's transferred to 10, a legal theory, so he's still responsible. Mm-hmm. He probably didn't intend to break anybody's bones, but he was angry. So he gets arrested. He's on parole, so they're holding him in. And we thought we had to, be fair to the poor 9-year-old girl that's walking around with a cast on her leg because this ex-con can't control his temper. Yeah. So we were insisting on him doing jail time. But the defense attorney was, saying, as with any other case in the Bronx, it should get plea bargains to have minimal jail time. But that case went to trial, was going to trial because, again, we were taking the stand on the fact that a 9-year-old was injured and so severely injured. So once in a while, a case went to trial, and then you had an opportunity as a young lawyer to get in front of a jury, get in front of a judge, and start honing those skills of, presenting cases and making arguments, questioning witnesses, cross-examining witnesses, that if you were a lawyer going into a law firm, you may not have an opportunity to do 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, or never. So that's why I always tell any lawyers, especially that ask about the experience, it's a great place to learn how to try a case.
Yeah, because you definitely will. You definitely will. And now you did what? 7 years with the
6.5, or close to 7, a little over 6.5.
Right. And as you did, how long does it take? Well, I don't want to say how long does it take, but you kind of gave us a brief interview. So you start out writing cases as a regular, the bottom of the barrel. I come in, police officer, I drop you something, and you start writing the cases. That's where you start, because that's the most miserable part of the ADA's office, right?
Yep.
And you do that for how long until you get your next step and your next step and your next step? Because in the end, you were trying some pretty serious cases.
Yep. So I'll give you a little flavor for some of the beginning, some of the middle, and some of the end. I know we have limited time on our podcast today, but thought I'd pick a few cases out to chat about briefly. So at the beginning, yeah, you're in the complaint room. You spend a week in the complaint room at a time. You're on a schedule. So usually once a month, you go in the complaint room for 1 week. The other 3 weeks you spend in a misdemeanor part. So they call it an AP part, all-purpose part. So all-purpose meant that you would get the case ready for trials, all purposes. You'd file any affidavits from any person that owned property that's alleged to have been stolen to make the criminal complaint into an actual information that you can proceed with a criminal case on. So you got to make sure that the minimum amount of evidence or charges are supported in the court documents. So, and you also have to have a hearing about those confessions that I mentioned earlier and those identification procedures to see whether or not they were done properly. And any motions the defense may want to bring to suppress that evidence is all done in the AP part. So it's all paperwork. There's no questioning of witnesses or hearings or trials in the all-purpose part. It's all motions and paperwork. Now, once you're done with all that, it gets sent out to a JP part, jury part. And there, you pick a jury to try the criminal case, or if the defendant waives a jury, the judge tries the case. And then there's also limited circumstances where you might have a charge that's low enough that they're not doesn't require a jury. But in any event, you spend a year in the AP part and the complaint room, 1 week in the complaint room, 3 weeks filing the paperwork. And you also do arraignment duty from time to time during that, which also involves weekends. And that's when the arrest first comes into the complaint room and it goes up in front of a judge. You present the case, they present the charges to the defendant and the defendant's attorney and ask for bail. The judge determines whether bail is required or not, and then the case gets sent to the AP part. Towards the end of that year, you get assigned to the JP part, and this is where all the action happens. So this is where the case is sent for trial. And the judge in the JP1 asks if everybody's ready for trial, ready to pick a jury, you have all your witnesses, you have all of your evidence available, and then he looks and sees, or he or she looks and sees whether there are other judges available in JP2, 3, 4, and 5 to try a case or to do a hearing. So the case then gets sent out there to have a trial. So I'll tell you about one case because while this is all going on and you're a new lawyer and you're trying to understand the legal system and the procedural. So, in law school, you learn a lot about the law and the levels of felonies and misdemeanors. But now you're in the courtroom, you're a lawyer, a brand new lawyer, you're learning about the procedure. How does it actually work in real life? How does it move through the system? Where does all these evidence suppression paperwork take place, the hearing take place, the argument take place? And trying to get your head around that, you want to make a good impression on your supervisors, and you want to, ultimately become a manager, a supervisor. And one case in particular kind of struck me in the midst of all this chaos. I get a case in the AP part, and it's a defendant who's pregnant. She's in her early 20s, and she's charged with attempted arson. So this was a little unusual. Most of the stuff is shoplifting, auto theft, gun possession, and narcotics possession, right? Those would be the 4 run-of-the-mill cases that 80% of the docket involves. And then you got, a few assaults and a robbery or 2. And it's rare that you see an arson, but you see them. You remember the Happy Land incident in the Bronx.
I sure do. In fact,
many people
Henry responded to that.
Yeah, many people lost their lives there. My mentor in the prosecutor's office was the lead prosecutor on that case. I learned a lot from him about arson because I ended up in the Arson and Economic Crime Bureau eventually. So anyhow, she's charged with arson. So I start looking into the facts of the case, and the lawyer comes over and he's trying to get me to give her a reduced charge to a B misdemeanor and probation. But generally, the facts of the case were as follows. She's got a boyfriend who lives in a walk-up building. I keep thinking it's similar to the 6-story walk-up. I grew up in Manhattan. But this is in the Bronx. It's a walk-up building. I think it was actually 4 stories. And her boyfriend lived on the 2nd floor. So she and this gentleman had been dating for a short period of time, and a couple of months, and she ended up getting pregnant. And now she comes to him and she says, hey, I'm pregnant, and I guess they have discussions about what they're going to do for the future. So essentially, the young man tells her that he wants to have nothing to do with her. He doesn't want to have a future. He denies that it's his child. She tells him that she hasn't had any relations with anyone else, that it's definitely his. It's impossible for it to be anyone else's. And he just basically tells her to get lost, hit the road. He doesn't want to date her anymore, and he doesn't want to have a relationship with her. So this occurs in the building, and she goes out very upset, as you can imagine. And on the way out of the building, she turns around, and there's garbage cans that have to be put out for sanitation pickup on certain days of the night are kept in the hallway in this particular building. The superintendent kept them in the hallway. So she lights fire to the garbage, and the garbage just erupts in flames, and she runs out of the building and goes off. The flames continue to grow. The whole hallway gets engulfed in flames. The paint on the wall starts to burn. And this is where it gets interesting. It's very technical legal issues on arson. For arson to occur, the structure of the building has to be damaged by fire.
Yes.
So this made a lot of smoke, and it started burning the actual paint on the wall, but it had not burned the sheetrock or the wood 2x4s behind the sheetrock. So the structure of the building had not been involved in the flames. So the guy, the boyfriend, lived on the 2nd floor with his elderly father. A whole bunch of black smoke starts going up the hallway and filling the building. And sooner or later, people realize there's a fire, and they start running out of the building. And the elderly father gets stuck in the apartment. He gets overcome by smoke, and fire department responds, gets him out, and other people are assisted out. And the fire's put out before it damages the structure of the building. So that's why when it went to the felony court, to the Supreme Court, charged with arson, it got reduced to attempted arson, because technically you can't have it unless the fire burns the wood of the building.
Yeah.
So that lands the case on my plate, and I'm trying to figure out what's the right thing to do here. I don't think probation is in order, because the elderly man was overcome by smoke. But for the grace of God and the response of the fire department, he could easily have died, and we would have a homicide.
She could have killed dozens of people. You don't know.
And tons of other people. She knew the building was occupied because the boyfriend lived there. She had been there a number of times. She knew that his father was in the building. So it wasn't as if she was lighting an empty building on fire. She shouldn't be lighting anything on fire, obviously. So I insisted on her doing jail time. I wanted her to do a year in jail, and which is the maximum under an A misdemeanor, the attempted arson that she was charged with. And the defense attorney wanted probation. We go for the judge off the record, and the judge is basically trying to convince both of us to compromise our positions. I agreed to do 9 months, for her to do 9 months in jail. He didn't, again, stuck with the probation, and the judge asked me to do less. I said no. Sometimes you got to draw the line.
Oh, absolutely.
And the defense attorney, here's the kicker. This is the point of the whole story, right? The defense attorney looks me dead in the eye, and he says loud enough for the judge to say, well, it's because of you, Mr. Mulvey, that this woman is going to give birth to her baby on Rikers Island. So when you and I look at our birth certificate and it says St. Clair's Hospital or Columbian Presbyterian Hospital, this poor child, when he grows up, is going to look at his birth certificate, and it's going to say Rikers Island Hospital Facility, East Elmhurst, Queens.
Yeah. And
he's going to be forever tainted in his life. So that kind of hit me for a second. It kind of was like a slap in the face. Like I was like, wow, as much as this job is very involved and there's a grave responsibility that they're giving me here to make decisions on people's lives. It's affecting this woman's life. It's affecting the people that live in the building as crime victims. And now this child that hasn't even been born yet, presumably, he's right. But I took that and I weighed that again. And I said, but that still doesn't justify letting her off with probation based on the gravity of the crime. It ended up the judge took a plea to the full docket, which he's allowed to then determine the sentence without the prosecutor's judgment. And he gave her 30 days in prison. So it was probably a fair compromise. She did do prison time. But that's the reason I bring it up, is because the child was going to be born with the Rikers Island on his birth certificate. It was all my fault.
Yeah. Well, where I will argue that point, counsel, is that it would not have been your fault. It would have been her fault for lighting the building on fire to begin with. You know? So, and that's
why I hold my position.
Anyway,
the gravity of the responsibility sometimes, and I see some prosecutors don't realize that, especially younger ones. It is a grave responsibility. You have control over, people's liberty, whether they're in prison or not.
Yeah. But again, and it was the same thing I would tell people when they would, beg for a break to not be getting arrested for whatever it was that they had done, on my end when I was putting the handcuffs on people. And the bottom line is, man, when you got up out of bed this morning, you knew it was illegal to set buildings on fire. You knew it was illegal to buy drugs. You knew it was illegal to rob people, whatever it was. It's very hard for me to have sympathy, and especially now for the both of us here, we were, for lack of a better word, we were street kids, and I have a hard time sympathizing with your poor decisions.
There's an old adage, right? And people just say it simply, but they don't really think about it. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
Correct. Yeah. On that note, my friend, you know what? We're going to take a quick break right now, and we're going to come back and hear some more cool stories from you. All right?
Great. I'll refill my coffee cup.
All right. Very good. There you go. Let's take a break now. Hey, how you doing? It's me again, another nobody, Travis Myers. And today we're going to talk whiskey. I know most of you think of me as an all-American patriotic type guy, and you are right. But when it comes to whiskey and drinking whiskey, which I do, I always go for the Irish stuff. And my choice when it comes to the Irish stuff is Powers Irish Whiskey. Established back in 1791, it's a triple distilled, oak-aged whiskey. Powers is simply magic. It also happens to be the #1 selling whiskey in Ireland, which has got to say something, because if it's good enough for the Irish, it's good enough for you. So the next time you raise a glass, fill it with Powers, and think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm here again with my friend Mike Mulvey. Now, Mike, I want to ask you, okay, I mean, I know several different stories, but there was one that was kind of interesting about a crazy chop shop in the Bronx that you dealt with. You want to tell that one? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. Very interesting case. So I mentioned before about the Criminal Court Bureau and the Grand Jury Bureau. So apparently word got out that I was pretty good at investigating stuff, because the chief of the Arson and Economic Crime Bureau and the Investigations Division had approached me and asked me, was I interested in joining that division, and when I got promoted out of grand jury. And I said, absolutely, because I mentioned to you earlier, Travis, I always wanted to be a detective just like you. So this gave me an opportunity to run long-term investigations in the Investigations Bureau as opposed to just prosecutions. So it was kind of a great spot for me, because it was like in between an investigator and a prosecutor. So one of the things that was going on back in the 90s and started in the 80s and maybe probably in the 60s was the amount of auto theft that was going on nationwide.
Yes.
And in New York City in particular, I guess because of the amount of cars. But the Bronx was the #1 place where all the chop shops, as they called them, were located. And I think it was a combination of a lot of things. So there are a lot of junkyards there. And it was easy to hide the chop shop in the center of a junkyard, because it was just this huge space that, the general public couldn't see in, and that was walled off. And
now let me, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to anyway. All right. for our listeners who may not know exactly what a chop shop is, you want to give them,
Sure.
because that's kind of like our vernacular. It's not
Yeah.
truly a legal term, if you will.
So chop shop is a place where stolen cars are brought and then dismantled. And as some people know, us in the industry know, that a car dismantled into parts is worth a lot more money than it is in one piece. But more importantly here, the stolen car itself cannot be registered at a Department of Motor Vehicles because the VIN number would come back as stolen with an alarm out on it by the police department. So what the bad guys did, and organized crime and just regular street criminals did, was they would steal cars and then take them apart, and they'd sell the tires to a mechanic or a member of the public that needed tires to fit their particular car. They'd take the engine out and sell the engine to someone who had a car that the engine was blown in and install it in there. So it was a huge industry. It was very profitable. And again, the Bronx was I call the center of activity when it came to chop shops in New York City. And there's an area in Queens out by Shea Stadium, now Citi Field, that at that time was also very active with chop shops. So in the Investigations Bureau, as I said, we would run long-term investigations into various things, corrupt politicians, insurance fraud, but also chop shops. So the key there was when investigating a chop shop, and this is a little bit unrelated to the case, but just to give you the full story about the chop shops, is if you could trace the stolen car going into the chop shop somehow, if you followed it, or the new thing at the time was LoJack. So the LoJack on the car would indicate the position of the car. So if the car was stolen, and then the LoJack company turned on the LoJack signal, and the police had a computer or a tracking device that could read it, and if it indicated it was in a particular junkyard, then the police would come to the prosecutors, and the prosecutors would go to the judge and get a search warrant. And then the police could go into the junkyard and search for that particular car. And in the process, they'd see many other cars, and as they checked the VIN on those cars to see whether it was one they were looking for, they would also be able to see in their computer system whether that was stolen or not. So it would not be unusual to follow one stolen car into a chop shop and then be able to take out scores and scores of vehicles and vehicle parts that had been previously reported stolen. So in an effort to combat this, both law enforcement and the insurance industry, for that matter, were very interested in large-scale investigations that could make an impact on reducing the stolen cars and the location of the chop shops. So the Bronx District Attorney's Office got together with the New York City Police Department and the National Insurance Crime Bureau and put together a plan to rent a garage in the Bronx and then put up false walls with cameras installed and put word out on the street that this was a chop shop, and hope that criminals would bring stolen cars in there and sell them to our undercover police officer. And then with the videotape evidence, we could come back and arrest that individual later on, and we would have a Loctite case if they were on video negotiating the sale of a stolen car to a police officer, and we'd be able to put them in jail. So that's exactly what we did. So the New York
very
City
similar
police,
to like in narcotics, where we would do reverse buys, where
yes,
we would pose as the drug dealers and scoop up all of the drug buyers. And this was not, obviously, they're all misdemeanor arrests when you're talking about narcotics. However, that would give us so much intel as to that we could garner off of these arrests that would lead on to something bigger and better, we hoped. So
that's exactly right, Travis. Exactly right. So what we actually did was, since none of the guys in the New York City Police Department auto crime unit looked convincing enough, although some of them did, we actually borrowed a narcotics undercover to be the undercover for our operation. So the police department, and I don't remember the exact numbers, so don't hold me to it, but I think the police department chipped in $5,000. The Bronx DA put in $5,000, and the National Insurance Crime Bureau, which is a a organization of insurance companies put up $10,000, and we took the money, put it into an account. We got a ledger where we kept track of all of our expenditures. We rented a garage, and we had some carpenters come in and put sheetrock up in the garage so that there was a false wall, so that it looked like the garage was smaller than it really was. And then we had some pinhole cameras in the sheetrock watching the interior of the garage. Then through our narcotics undercover partners, we just put word out on the street that location over there, that's a chop shop. They buy stolen cars. And much to our surprise and I guess delight, people started driving in with stolen cars, and our undercover would come up to them and say, who are you? What are you doing here? And they'd say, I got this car, I want to sell it. And, the undercover would say, well, who are you? I don't know you. Are you a cop? And kind of play the role and make the criminal think that this was a legitimate operation that was buying stolen cars. So, we start off at $500, they'd ask for $1,000, and then we'd negotiate $800. He'd say, drive the car into the garage. We drive it into the garage. You have this nice red sports car sitting under the bright lights and the camera taking video of this. And the undercover would reach in his pocket. He'd take out a wad of $100 bills, and he'd start counting out the cash right on the hood of the car, under the camera.
Yep.
And then as he's counting out, he said, where'd you get this from? And then the thief would say, oh, Queens. He'd go, really? You drove all the way over the White Stone Bridge with this car? And just engaged in this conversation. The guy was basically caught dead to rights on camera.
Yeah.
But then the problem became how to identify him. So how do we know who this thief is? He's not coming in showing his identification, his passport to the undercover cop. So what we did was we had a squad car in a sector car that was in the precinct that knew what we were. Obviously, we told them ahead of time what was going on. And we had our auto crime guys in an unmarked car sitting outside. So when the thief would come with another accomplice in a different car who'd wait outside for him, and the thief would get in that car, and then they'd drive off. So what the unmarked car would follow them until they would see them come to make a traffic infraction. So they'd go through a stop sign without stopping, or they'd go through a red light. And then they'd call the sector car, and the sector car would come over, pull them over for the traffic infraction, and then ask them for the license and registration in order to give them a ticket for the traffic violation. And in that way, they got the driver's license and the identity of the driver. Mm-hmm. And then if it wasn't the same person who sold the car, then the person who sold the car was the passenger seat, they'd ask them, who are you? What are you doing? What's your name? Do you have your driver's license? And they produced that a few times. Usually they were driving the other car. But anyway, we got the information, and we preserved the parking, the traffic infraction ticket in case we were going to have a trial, and kept all the evidence that way. So this went on for about a month and a half. We purchased about 12 cars. First they would come in like once a week, and then we're getting 2 cars a week, and then 3 cars a week, so it came more and more. And then finally some of the bad guys would ask the undercover, hey, would you buy anything else? And the undercover was like, well, like what? And well, may have some cocaine, this, that, the other thing, heroin. And the next thing you know, they're driving the stolen car in, and they got 2 kilos of coke on the hood, and the undercover's counting out the cash for the cars and the coke. And we're getting worried because the National Insurance Crime Bureau gave us money to buy cars, and now we're buying cocaine.
Yeah.
And then it continues to get worse. And we're like, wow, this is really opening up a can of worms. Like, how much criminal activity is going on out there? And now they want to sell guns. And we're like, really? Well, bring them in. And how much you want for the gun? $100,000. No, I'll give you $250 for the gun. Because we were running out of our $10,000 pretty fast buying cars, guns, and drugs. So we're not kind of negotiate to be able to stay alive. So with the cash flow. So now we're buying the guns. And then finally we started thinking about it. We say, well, there's a lot of connections here. There's drugs, there's guns. Some of this could get violent. Now, each time there's a sale going on, we had a whole army of cops behind the sheetrock with shotguns ready to jump out in case, especially now that the guns are coming out and being sold. If they're selling us guns, they probably are armed with guns.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure we're protecting that undercover. But we thought at this point, we had about a dozen cars. We had 2 kilos of coke. We had about 7 guns. We were running out of cash. And we thought we had done enough for this project, and we'd close up shop, and we would do another one in the future. So what we did at that time was we notified the landlord that we were terminating the lease for the garage, and we returned residual of the funds. I don't think actually there was any funds. We trued up whatever funds were left in the account, and then we sent the Auto Crime Bureau out with the task of going around to all of these individuals' homes and arresting them. And one of the things we were concerned with is if we arrested 5 of them and then not the other 7 would get word these guys are locked up and they may flee. So we wanted to arrest everybody at the same time, but we had to have an army of police to go out to 12 houses with enough firepower and manpower to make sure everyone's safe in the arresting team. But we were able to do it. We got cooperation from the local precincts, and we were able to go out. We arrested them all one morning, went out at 5 a.m. and then banged on the door at 6 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And we got everybody except one guy who was in the wind for about 2 weeks. And then we ended up, somebody stopped him at a traffic stop or something and seen there was a warrant out and brought him in. So then the big thing was, like you were saying, when you buy the narcotics, is to get intel. So each one of these guys, and I was going to mention it earlier when you were talking about the complaint room and the narrow corridor where the assistant DAs were sitting, there was also in the back of central booking, there was a door and there was a narrow staircase that went upstairs to the second floor.
Sure, that's where you would house the women, and they had other offices up there too.
And then in the back, there was a staircase that went to a room where we had a video camera set up, an interview room. It was in part of the police department side, as part of the DA side. So when I was a prosecutor there, we set that up. And the idea was that when someone first gets arrested, now they're kind of shook up and they're nervous. It's more likely they're going to talk then than later after they get to arraignment and they get assigned a lawyer. And the lawyer says, keep your mouth shut, don't say anything to the police. Mm-hmm. So what we were doing at the time, if you remember, is we set up a video camera. The district attorney's office had a video unit with a bunch of video technicians that had these cameras that would come out to crime scenes and videotape them, but also to precincts and videotape confessions with assistant district attorneys' questions.
Let me interrupt you for a second, just on my take on that. I did, because I know exactly the room that you're talking about. And the thing that got me, even then, so I don't know what we're talking, this is still the early 90s sometime, and the idea that room was brand new, that we had never videotaped, it was a new thing, sitting up a little, and these were, again, the big old cassette camcorder deals that sat in the corner, or sat up high, and I remember going in there for a robbery one time. It was the first time I ever went in there, and it was like something that was so new, we were like excited to use it. Yep. We're going to videotape this interview. It was just a really big deal for the police as a whole to actually do that. Now, everybody expects that's common practice. You turn on TV and watch the first 48 or whatever true crime show you're watching. Everything is videotaped. It was not back then. This was state of the art, cutting edge technology, tape recording your perps. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it absolutely was. And, nowadays you pull out an iPhone and you turn it on. Say, did you do it? Confess. And you get it on the tape right on the street, right? Or you can actually film them doing the crime, right? Yeah. But back then it was a new thing. So anyhow, so we quickly bring each one of these individuals we arrested into that room, put them on the camera, and I was there reading them their rights and then asking them would they answer any questions. And they all clammed up, wouldn't say a word. And we're like, well, these are pretty tough group of operators, and they're not going to rat out their colleagues, so to speak. But one of them did. One of them agreed to cooperate, and we used him. It's a long story, but we had agreed to certain things with him, and we weren't going to put him through the system. And we wanted to see how much more he would cooperate before we were going to charge him.
Mm-hmm.
We knew who he was. We felt fairly confident he was a car thief and not a, like we call a muscle, like a hitman or someone who was very dangerous. So we were going to work with him. But the problem was everybody got arrested in his crew that morning, and if he didn't show up in court under the arraignment, they were going to know that he turned state's evidence. So we had to put him through the system just to make it look good and that for his safety as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of maintained that facade for a couple of months as he continued to work with us to try to get more evidence. And in the end, he gave us some evidence that we were able to give him some kind of a break. And a couple of the other guys were suspicious because they were wondering why they had to go to jail for so long. And they were hearing word on the street that this guy, he was out after, on probation and ever. But as part of that deal, we were talking about the pregnant women earlier and kind of feeling a little remorse or a little guilt or whatever. So as part of that deal, one of the car thieves that sold a car was this 15-year-old Haitian immigrant. And he had a very strict mom. And we get to Supreme Court and we have an evidence suppression hearing for the video, whether or not I could introduce the video of him selling the car to the undercover at trial. And it was a very strict African-American judge on the bench. He was so strict, he was shouting at the defense attorney for the boy to plead guilty. And at that time, he was 15, so he could be treated as an adult for the level of felony we had charged him with. And they were looking to get, some kind of leniency. And I was even willing to go along with, he was 15, right? So, the kid still has a chance to get rehabilitated. But I tell you, I remember his mom sitting in the second row of the courtroom, crying her eyes out, watching this whole thing going on. The boy crying at the defense attorney. This was not a hardened criminal. And the judge screaming at the defense attorney that, if it doesn't please, bring in a jury in. We're going to convict him right now. That judge is going to send him away for the rest of his life. And I'm like the monkey in the middle, and I'm trying to, get a fair disposition, fair to everybody. And, I think 2.5 years was on the table. And I was okay with going along with a year. It was his first offense, as long as he took a felony, Class E felony. And the judge then says, he's kind of questioning my case. And I said, Judge, we have him dead to rights on a videotape. He says, what do you mean? And he says, I want to see the video. So we adjourn it till the afternoon. We bring in the video, play the video, and the judge looked at it. And he started screaming at the kid. He said, "You plead guilty right now, or I'm going to send you up the river for Mr. Mulvey's being generous, giving you a year. You don't take it. My thing is 2.5 to 5. But if you get convicted after trial," he says, "you're going to get 9 to 18." So poor kid was crying, and he took the A misdemeanor in a year. I was in a position where the National Insurance Crime Bureau had given us money, and they were tracking this, and they wanted to see results.
Yes.
And, there was too much focus on this thing, and not to say that you don't deserve a break when it's true. And he did get a break. He got a year. But there again, it was kind of a tearjerker, a 15-year-old crying first offense. Yeah. He gets rolled up in some other unsavory characters that are, in their 30s or 40s that are doing this all their life.
Well, I'll tell you something, too, and I know you're going to agree with me because we've talked about this before, and I hope my listeners understand because they've listened to me before. The whole, due to crime, due to time thing, but there is a bit of empathy that we can put out to these kids because they were not all that different quite often than how we grew up, And, the old "there but the grace of God go I" is very realistic in these situations because at 15, we were incredibly mature people at 15. We knew what the world was about, and so do these kids. They are not children by any means, all right? At the same time, as a young man of that age, you're a stupid person, and you don't know what you're getting mixed up in, And it's so easy for, I'll say it today. I would sell drugs before I would go hungry, I would. That's how simple it is. I'm not condoning it by any means. I've locked up thousands of drug dealers over the years, but I can understand it. I can understand it. And, you were understanding in that situation, and maybe the judge was not so much, but in the end, the kid did all right, only taking a year,
Yeah.
which he probably already had some time served too. So what did he end up doing? 7, 8
Yeah,
months maybe?
he probably got out a little early also because of his age and good behavior.
Sure.
So I
Absolutely.
don't know what he did in the end, but probably I would just take a guess that it was 9 months. But
Right. Right. So big, it was a big case. Now I just ask you with this, was this, so you locked up dozens of people, but were many of them connected? Was there any kind of crime ring, an organized group that you were dealing with? Or were these just random guys that started showing up because they knew they could get rid of cars with you?
well, so it was a group of people. Some of them were random that weren't
Mhm.
connected to the others, but there was a group of about 4 or 5 of the individuals that were connected with each other that were coming out of Queens County and driving the cars to the Bronx to sell
Mhm.
them to us.
So there
Um,
was an element of an organized crime
yeah.
situation.
So I don't know that they were organized in the sense that they were, because the real organized crime component of something like this would be the buyers of the cars, I think, taking it apart and then reselling the parts. But these guys were kind of connected that they knew each other and they
Correct.
were all doing the same thing. And maybe they shared the tools of the trade, how to steal the car. And they knew each other from the street,
Mhm.
and they were from the same general area in Queens. And I think part of the word got out probably through the narcotics undercovers in that area. Some car thief learned about it and told his friends,
Yeah.
and then they kind of followed suit. I mean, one night they brought in 2 cars. That's when we started closing it down. We can't even, we don't have a parking lot to put all these things in. The
Yeah.
precinct parking lot was full. So they brought 2 cars. They stole both of them in Queens, drove them over the bridge, and then one drove in and sold it while the other one waited in line to sell it after him. So they were organized in the sense that they kind of knew each other. They were sharing tools of the trade, the car thieves, and in that sense, but they weren't really organized that they had a big operation going
Can
that
you
was
imagine
involving a
too
lot of money or
what
cash.
what we could do? We the quote unquote good guys. If the police and the district attorney's office could get together on things like this and had unlimited resources. Because here you had to do it where you had $5,000 from the police department, $5,000 from the district attorney's office, and $10,000 from this anti-auto crime network thing, whatever it was. You know, if you could keep operations like this going continuously, you would be scooping. It'd be the old fish in the barrel thing. You'd just be scooping them up like crazy. You know,
Yeah, no, agree
but you
100%.
can't. It's
And
sad.
that was 1990s cash.
Yeah.
Probably
Yes.
worth more today.
Yeah. Of course. Of course. Yeah. Tell us about if that's it. Are you done with this one? That case
Yeah,
pretty much wrapped up,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You
I would
had
just say
one.
to close on that, Travis. I just say that with LoJack and then with subsequent car tracking systems, and now you've got Apple tags and all kinds of things. The car theft industry's been brought to its knees. We don't see the amount of cars stolen anymore, or we don't see the chop shops, the
Mhm.
prevalence of them in the Bronx anymore, and in other areas around the country. But apparently, the new trend, as I see and hear and read in the newspapers, is stealing the catalytic converters,
Yes.
and those have precious metals inside them, platinum and other things that are
Hmm.
hard to get, and that's why they're so valuable.
Well,
But
and they can do it literally in seconds.
yeah,
A professional will get that thing out of your car in less than a minute. It's
yeah,
unbelievably fast. And I got to give the guys credit. It's amazing what they do. They can pull up. I mean, they can steal dozens of those in a night. You
yeah.
know,
They
and
they tend to also target parking lots, like at colleges and places and dorms where a lot of cars are parked overnight, and they'll just like you say, hit 5 or 10 cars at a shot. And I've seen them doing it, video of them doing it in people's driveways and things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But I think the manufacturing of the catalytic converters are now using, other than these precious metals, using some other type of technology. I'm not sure, because I think that they're only targeting older cars where they did use the precious metal to whatever chemical reaction goes on in the catalytic converter to reduce air pollution.
Hmm.
I think they've found a substitute for those things, so may not see that going forward with the newer
Yeah, it's
cars.
like anything. You just got to bring the price down. If the price is down, it's not worth being bothered with. So,
Right.
Another really interesting story, if we got time, and I think we do, and I don't care, we'll run over if we have to. You were mixed up with a very interesting one. It was big in Spanish news. I know El Diario had it all over the place, and that was with one of these characters from the Marielito boat lift that showed up and kind of decided he was a little bit tougher than the judges and ADAs who were trying to put him away. Am I
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's the most famous case that I ever handled. Um, it was pretty complex. So the defendant in that case, his name was Armando Hernandez,
Mm-hmm.
and he came to the United States from the Mariel boat lift, as you indicated. When, if you know, those of us that were around back in the '90s
Yeah,
and the
let
'80s, it
me
was late '80s,
let me
1986, I
actually let me
think.
just describe that for our listeners again. I think it was 1980. It might have been that early, I think, because it was still under Carter when that happened, President Carter. And what's his name? Castro had a brilliant idea, okay, and sent, it was like 15, 1,800 boats full of the worst people he could find in Cuba, emptied his prisons, his, psych hospitals, everything else, homeless people, set them all on boats and sent them to Florida, you know? And Jimmy Carter, said, welcome to the United States, everybody. And here we were. That's where the movie Scarface, that's what that was
Yeah,
about. If anybody's
that's
familiar
right.
with that movie, that was a Marielito boat lift. And I believe it was 1980. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
No, I think
Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. Thank you for the background, Travis. I think you're right. So, so it's a very long story, but to give you the abbreviated version, this gentleman from the Mariel boat lift lived in Queens County here in New York City, and there was a group of drug dealers in the neighborhood where he lived and he operated. And these drug dealers obviously were selling drugs, and part of selling drugs, as you know 100% better than I, is moving them around.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be caught with a large amount of drugs on your person or in your car. So the drug dealers were paying the auto thieves, right? We talked about those already, to steal cars for them. And then the drug dealers would use those cars to transport the narcotics around the neighborhoods at the different places where they were sold. So that first they obviously get large amount of drugs in large quantities, and then they break them down into little baggies, glassine envelopes, and then they would move them out to different corners and buildings where someone else would sell them. So they paid the car thief to steal cars for them, and they gave the car thief, I can't remember, I thought it was $500, but it was some couple $100 per car. So he steal a car, they'd pay him for the car. He'd steal another car, they pay him. Steal a car, they tell him we'll pay you tomorrow. They pay him the next day, steal two cars, they pay for two. So finally they start falling behind and reimbursing him for the cars that he's stolen for them. And he comes around asking for his money. And they're like, well, go away right now. We're more important than you. We're more powerful than you. You're a little peon, a flea on the dog's tail, get lost. And he'd go away, then he'd come back again. So finally he got to the point where they were upset. They felt that he was nagging them and they weren't going to pay him. And they told him, forget it, you're not getting paid. And he was kind of upset about it, and he would argue with them, and he kept coming back. So they go to Armando Hernandez, the gentleman who came over on the Mariel boat lift, and they said, can you take care of this guy for us? Can you kill him for us? Armando agrees to kill the car thief for the drug dealers.
So he's gonna kill this guy over a matter of five to
Couple of
$1,500.
$100, 500, maybe a few thousand, however many cars
Nothing
they own.
for
And the
nothing.
drug dealers are making millions, certainly in a year they're making millions. And this is why they want to kill him. And who knows what they're paying him. It wasn't clear what was paid for the murder. It might have been more than what he owed, or maybe it was less. But, that's the problem with a lot of these criminals that we dealt with. They've got no guilt. They've got no respect for human life. They've got no empathy. They have no feelings about it. I guess to them, it's a business transaction. They got to move their drugs. They need a car. The guy wants to get paid. He's annoying them too much. He's interfering with their business. Kill him, right?
Yeah.
So Armando agrees to kill the car thief for the drug dealers. and he goes and gets his wife to assist with the murder. And he and his wife takes their family station wagon to go kill the car thief.
Well, that's what you
So
do. It's a family business.
So I guess he wanted to keep the payment for the murder to himself, share it with his wife rather than cut somebody else in.
Yeah.
So he tells his wife, "Come with me. You drive. I'm going to sit in the back seat of the station wagon with the gun, and we're going to go pick up the car thief. And I'm going to tell him that, we're driving him somewhere to do something. And then you go to Flushing Meadow Park into the parking lot, and I'm going to kill him in the back seat." And that's what they do. They go and they pick up the car thief. Somehow he convinces the guy to get into the back seat. I don't know if he knew him previously or not. I don't know if he told him, hey, the drug dealers sent me to pick you up to come and get you paid for the stolen cars. I don't know what happened there because that all happened in Queens County. And Armando killed the car dealer. And I believe he dumped the body in the parking lot or somewhere in the park. And Armando ends up getting arrested, and his wife ends up getting arrested, and both of them are prosecuted for the murder of the car thief. So the prosecution approaches Armando's wife and convinces her to turn state's evidence against her own husband. And she's scheduled to testify against him at trial. And now they're both in the city criminal system, and there's concern for her safety because she's now a state's witness. And they end up putting her in a prison in Bronx House of Detention so that it's outside of Queens County and it's off Rikers Island. And they think they could protect her a little more, that other female inmates can't get to her to kill her there, but they might, or get word that she's wanted dead, because Armando puts a hit out on his wife. And he starts asking around in the prison, "Hey, do you know somebody who could get to my wife? This is her name. She's in the system, and I'll pay you to kill her because she's going to testify against me at trial. I don't want to get convicted." So they're concerned for her safety. They have her up in the Bronx, and they're protecting her. Eventually, the case goes to trial. They bring her in. She testifies against Armando. Armando gets convicted of murder, and he gets 25 to life. So he's now going to be transferred up to state prison to serve his 25 to life. And now his focus turns away from his wife and onto the judge who presided over his murder trial, who just sentenced him to 25 to life, the prosecutor, the Queens County prosecutor who prosecuted the murder trial, the detective who arrested him for the murder, and the district attorney of Queens County, because after all, he's the boss of the assistant district attorney who prosecuted him. And he starts now asking around the prison system, "Hey, do you know somebody who can kill the Queens DA, the judge, the Queens assistant DA, and the detective?" And at that point, he's housed in a prison unit in a cell with another gentleman who came over from the former USSR as an adolescent or youngster. So he's got a very thick Russian accent. He's in his early 20s. And he's been going around Queens County robbing drug dealers. Because in his mind, if I rob the drug dealer, they're not calling the cops because they're selling drugs. They're going to get locked up, so they can't say anything. They can't complain. So I'm going to get away with the cash and the drugs. And I guess he wasn't too afraid of organized crime or the drug dealers themselves or who they worked for, because he went around.
And robbing drug dealers for bad guys. And we have some people we know from our neighborhood, who, if you remember just recently, one was unfortunately killed by the police. We're not going to mention any names here, but I can enlighten you afterwards if you don't know what I'm talking about. Just happened, 2 months ago. But for, neighborhood bad guys, robbing drug dealers is very common because they know they can't go to the police. So all you got to do is be a bigger badass than the guy you're robbing, and you're pretty much home. It's a home run as far as a crime, So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm glad you interjected because I think that's good to give our viewers the full flavor of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So now he's facing 10 robberies of drug dealers. And, at the beginning, he wasn't too concerned about it, but now cases are getting closer to trial. The prosecutors are starting to put the cases together, and his lawyer's starting to talk to him about the possibility of him spending the rest of his life in prison. Meanwhile, his mother is also living in Queens County, and she visits him on a regular basis. That becomes important, and I'll tell you why in a minute. He decides that he's going to be able to use this information that the cellmate Armando Hernandez wants to kill the judge and the district attorney, the assistant district attorney, and the detective to his advantage. That he'll try to get a reduction in sentencing. Well, he really hopes is that he'll get no sentencing if he shares this information with the authorities. Mm-hmm. So he reaches out to the authorities to report that his cellmate wants to kill these government officials. Mm-hmm. And he asks for some type of leniency in return. So the Queens District Attorney, who had prosecuted him and was prosecuting, had prosecuted Armando for the homicide, now receives the information. And they decide, wait a second, the District Attorney of Queens County is the victim, can't be the prosecutor. The assistant DA is the victim, he can't be the prosecutor. Yeah. So there's a conflict of interest. Yeah. Someone might later on say, well, because you were the victim, you treated the case more harshly, or you didn't follow the rules, you bend the rules, or you asked for a higher sentence, charge them with a more serious crime than it's appropriate. So they decided to turn the matter over to the federal prosecutors. So the federal prosecutors looked at it, but they concluded, as I understand it, I wasn't part of the discussion, that there wasn't a federal crime involved. Mm-hmm. So then the procedure is for the administrative judge of the city of New York to appoint a special district attorney where the district attorney has a conflict of interest. So it was pretty common practice at the time, and I believe it probably still is that the Queens District Attorney's office, if they can't handle something, that the Bronx District Attorney's office was appointed a special district attorney in Queens County for the one case. Mm-hmm. A private lawyer could get appointed, or the prosecutor. Sometimes it's better for another prosecutor's office because they've got the resources, investigators, etc., and experience for that matter. So the Bronx District Attorney's office was appointed special district attorney for this case, and I was fortunate enough to be selected by the Bronx District Attorney to be the only prosecutor on the case.
I was curious. That's what I was going to ask. All of this stuff happening in Queens, how did it land in your lap? Yeah. And you just explained it.
Yeah. So now I'm used to getting on the elevator from my office to go down to the elevator to the floor of the courtroom and go into court, try the case. And if I had a very large quantity of files and evidence that I need to bring, we even had a cart, we'd roll it in if we wanted. But now I had to go out to Queens to try the case. Yeah. So I had to load everything up in my personal car in the trunk, drive out there, park a distance from the courthouse, carry boxes back and forth. So it was a little cumbersome, but it was well worth it. So anyhow, to try to get along with this long story, so the Russian national drops the dime, so to speak, on the cellmate, and now we start setting up a proper investigation because now we're handling the case. And one of the things we started out with, you talk about new technology, that video camera. Mm-hmm. We had, I don't know if this will ring a bell with you, but an F-Bird recording device.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back in the day, you had to wear a wire. They were kind of cumbersome. They got smaller and smaller. Now there was this computer chip that would record, but it wouldn't give real time. We couldn't hear while the conversation was going on, but it would record everything. And then we could take the chip, plug it into a computer, and play back the conversation. So we outfitted the cellmate with an F-Bird recording device in the prison, and we sent him back in to talk to a cellmate about the murder, about getting someone to do the murder. So the cellmate at this point was engaging him in daily discussions with conversations like, "Oh, you're from Russia, right? You must know someone retired from the Russian army that's a marksman, that's a sharpshooter that could kill the assistant DA from the distance when he parks his car." And it was interesting because he mentioned, I don't want to get into too many details. I don't know if it could still be sensitive for other reasons, but the prosecutor was parking his car in the correction department's parking lot because it was a little bit more convenient to where he had to go.
Mm-hmm.
And this inmate, or the one who wanted to put the hit out, Armando Hernandez, knew that he wasn't parking in where the other assistant DA parks. He's parking where the correction officers park. So we're like, how did he know that? He must have somebody on the outside that's watching. Something's going on. So he says he could take you must know a hitman that retired from the Russian army because you're Russian that could shoot him from the distance. So our guy would then engage him. Well, how much would you pay? We coached him on what to say. And then, they agreed on, I believe it was $10,000. And then we talked some more. And then the Russian ancestry inmate, like I said, his mother would come and visit him. So when it came up as, well, how am I going to pay you? And he says, well, your mother comes in and visits you, right? We'll give the money to your mother. And he goes, oh, how are you going to do that? You're in here. Oh, don't worry. I got somebody outside that's going to help.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, one day, so they give the Armando Hernandez the address of the mother to deliver the money and her telephone number to call. So sure enough, one day he goes out to the phone and he calls her house. The detectives had met her on the other end and connected a recording device to her phone. And they told her, if he ever calls, push this button. So he calls, she pushes the button, she engages a conversation with him. And then she goes to work the next morning. She opens the apartment door and she steps out onto the welcome mat on the outside of her entrance door. And it's elevated. Her foot kind of turns sideways and she realizes something's underneath the welcome mat. She pulls the mat aside. There's an envelope there. She opens the envelope. There's $5,000 in cash in the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at that point, we started to get nervous because we knew someone on the outside was helping him. He mentioned where the prosecutor parked his car, which no one would know unless someone was watching. And we thought that he might then go to the outside person and get him to do a murder or get an alternate hitman. So we decided that we had to shut down the investigation and bring the prosecution. But a couple of other tidbits about it that makes this stuff so interesting, fun, and right to write a book about is that we then gave the inmate the phone number of a controlled phone at the Queens DA squad. So the NYPD has a group of detectives assigned to each district attorney's office in the 5 boroughs of New York City. So there was a particular phone, and the prefix, the first 3 numbers of the phone were something other than a government phone, other than the police and the court phones, so that if someone calls, they wouldn't suspect that it has the same exchange as the police department or the court. And everyone in the squad was told if the phone rings, don't answer it, because we knew the hitman was going to call. And they had to have the right script to answer the phone and say who they were. And there was a young detective on the staff who had ancestors that came over from the former USSR. Mm-hmm. So he used to get ready, talk to the uncles at the christening, and he knows the accent by sound. He's able to imitate them very well. So we solicited him in on our project, and we told him what to say. So you're the Russian hitman. You spent 4 years in the Russian army. You retired. You came to the United States, and you're out there for hire, and you're going to accept $10,000 to kill the DA and the detective, etc. And all year round, we're waiting for the phone to ring. The phone's never ringing. And it comes to August, the middle of August, and the Queens District Attorney is having their annual summer picnic. So all the staff go out, all the prosecutors, paralegals, administrative assistants, and all the detective investigators and all the NYPD squad that work with the Queens DA are all invited, and everybody's going to go to the picnic in Flushing Meadow Park. And the captain of the squad felt terrible making this young detective who was new to the group miss the company picnic. So he says, you go right along. I'll watch the phone. I'm going to stay back. I'm going to take one for the team. So this older captain of the detective squad, 40 years on the job, Irish-American, probably rarely spoke with, Russian people, wasn't in Brighton Beach in Brooklyn where we have a large Russian contingent, is sitting there. He's now in charge of the phone. He knows what to say, but there's no way in God's earth that if we hear him talk, we're going to think he's Russian, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So sure enough, while everybody's at his squat, the phone starts to ring. And he panics. He goes up. These things can only happen. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
He answers the phone, and
Really?
he puts on the best Russian accent he can muster up. But at the trial, the defense attorney took the tape and played it back 2 or 3 times for the jury. And he says, listen to that. He goes, clearly that's not a Russian national. Obviously, my defendant knew that this was a farce. He was just going along with the game. He knew he wasn't really meaning to kill somebody. You see for yourselves, that doesn't sound like someone who retired from the Russian army.
Yeah.
He's pronouncing everything wrong. And he was right. He was right. So I got up, undeterred, got back in front of the jury, and I said, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I said, defense attorney's right about that. I would agree that he was a Russian national. You wouldn't agree. Defense attorney wouldn't agree. But what about Armando Hernandez? What do we know about him? Grew up in Cuba, spoke Spanish as his primary language, educated in school, speaking Spanish. Never spoke a word of English until he came over here on the Mariel boat lift, so many years ago. And would he know how a Russian person spoke? Probably not. Look at all of what he did what he said during the conversation. He agreed to pay the money. He delivered the cash. So if he thought it wasn't really a hitman, why is he going all the trouble to get cash delivered to the police?
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense. He knows no one's going to get killed. I said, so despite what Mr. So-and-so defense attorney's argument, it's clear that Armando Hernandez thought it was the Russian hitman because Armando Hernandez delivered the cash. And we've heard him on several recording devices after that, and he's continuing to go along with the scam. So or go along with the hit. So if he didn't think it was a real hit, he wouldn't have abandoned that much earlier. And sure enough, they convicted him. It was kind of interesting because towards the end, he stopped asking about killing the detective. And he just kept focusing on the prosecutor, the assistant DA, and the judge. I actually brought the judge in and had him testify at trial. That was an interesting cross-examination. Defense attorney jumped up and objected to me calling the judge Your Honor. And he says to the judge of the trial,
yes,
instruct him not to refer to the witness as Your Honor. And then the judge looks for me, and the jury's watching this intently, back and forth. The judge of the trial looks at me for my response. And I said, of course I'm going to call him Your Honor because he's a judge and Your Honor's a judge and you're both judges. I'm going to call you both Your Honor. It is what it is. You can't deny the fact that he's a judge. And I look at the defense attorney, and all he was doing was prolonging the fact and making more light of it.
Yes.
And then it looks to the jury, of course, you're going to believe a judge is a judge presiding over the trial instructing you. Now there's a judge in the witness box who's saying that the defendant called him on the phone and threatened to kill him, and he recognized his voice on the phone from his voice in the courtroom from when he tried him. He said over a trial for 3 weeks, he heard his voice every day, and he heard the voice on the phone. It's the same voice that threatened him on the phone. So everything kind of came together. It was very interesting in the courtroom when all these issues came out in front of the jury, and they convicted him of conspiracy. So as I said, towards the end, he stopped asking to kill the detective. He only asked about killing the 2 prosecutors and the judge. And then on one of the F-Bird recording devices, he said, forget about the DA, just kill the judge and the prosecutor. So the defense attorney argued that he reneged on the hit. So the jury ended up convicting him of 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder for the last 2.
Instead of 4.
Yeah. And then I told the judge to sentence him to the maximum allowable under the law, which is an attempt to commit a crime, then half of the time in prison. So instead of 25 to life for the murder, the conspiracy to commit the murder, 12 and a half to 25. And I asked the judge to make it, instead of consecutive to the 25 to life he was doing for the murder, to make it subsequent to that. So he then has to do 37 and a half to life before he's eligible for parole.
Right. Wow.
At the sentencing, he started cursing at the judge, told the judge he was going to come back, rape the judge's wife, and then kill the judge. And I thought to myself, how does he think that's going to help him with the sentencing? The judge is going to go light on him for that? So the judge kept pausing to let him finish the screaming and the cursing, and then he pronounces the sentence. And the defendant turns around. He sees the Queens prosecutor who convicted him of murder sitting in the front row. And he starts yelling at him. He says, I'm going to get you. You. Don't look at me with that smirk on your face. I'm going to get you. And then finally, the court officers are trying to get him. I guess this is why I'm glad I never went through with the court officer application. They're trying to get him out of the dock and back into the prison. He wouldn't go. So 2 more court officers had to go. So they picked him up, one holding one arm, one holding the other, the third court officer holding a leg, fourth court officer holding the fourth leg. And they carried him like a battering ram to the prison door to try to get him out. And as he's squirming and screaming, he looked at me. And he goes, and you, Murphy. So that's not my name, right? But Murphy, again, came over from Cuba. So English is in his first language. And that's why he believed the Russian without the accent. And he's calling me Murphy. He says, you, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you too. So I just nodded and smiled because I thought he was going to be up in Sing Sing with the telephone book out, looking up Murphy instead of Mulvey, and he's never going to find me. It was on the front page of El Diario, and it said Justicia in Spanish, and a picture of his mad face with open eyes. So in the end, case.
In the end, all said, what did he end up with? 37 to life.
37 and a half to life.
37 and a half to life. So couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
So that was probably the most trustworthy case that I had.
Yeah. Well, Michael, that's a hell of a story, man. That was a good story. Had all the intrigue of a Netflix special, you know. So
one day we'll write a book.
You should. You definitely should. It's been doing good for me. You got to do it yourself, you know. Yeah. So, well, with that, my friend, I think we'll call it a day and make this an episode. All right.
Yeah, Travis, it was great catching up, and I look forward to doing it again sometime.
I really do hope you come back. I really do, Michael. I thank you so much for joining me. It's great. I'm having fun doing this so far, but it's great when I can have people who are actually my friends and we share a history with. And you're a terrific storyteller. Again, please do come back. I very much look forward to that.
All right. Have a great day.
All the best, brother. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed listening to Michael Mulvey, as I very much enjoyed talking to him myself. Until next time, my friends, please do the right thing. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, thanks for listening. All the best. Take care of yourselves. Listen up. This one's important. I'd like to try to encourage you, please, to give to the Stephen Siller Foundation, Tunnel to Towers, at T2T.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org. Do good for those who've done good for you.